Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the stole wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Thursday, 10:30 Eastern Time, coming to you live on rumble.com/amradpod. Please give us a thumbs up. Follow us here on Rumble. We're trying to grow here, folks. Definitely subscribe to the audio format on iTunes and Spotify and iHeart, and tell a friend or 12. We're hoping to radicalize as many Americans as we possibly can when we bring them the message of the day, which is today, we're sitting on a powder keg. We're heading into the Memorial Day weekend, and had a chance recently just to watch a really good movie. It's been 5-6 years ago that it came out, Battle of Midway. So the movie is Midway. Came out in 2019. Highly recommend it. I think it's streaming on somewhere. So I was thinking about that as it pertains to the way things are in the country at this point. And for those who don't know, Battle of Midway, Japanese are planning this sneak attack. The Americans are able to foil that attempt. But because the Japanese are taken by surprise, all of their airplanes have bombs on them. But because the Americans sneak up on the fleet and happen upon them and start the attack, they are in the process of switching out the bombs for torpedoes so they can respond. So there is a time there where the Japanese are extremely vulnerable. They're sitting on a powder keg of bombs and torpedoes, and they have no means of putting planes in the air to defend themselves. So I think it's pretty appropriate when I think about what's going on today in the country, because we have a lot of drama as it pertains to illegal aliens. How are we going to deport them? Are we going to be allowed to deport them? We did send the mandate. There were millions and millions of people who went to the polls and said, we want to get rid of all the illegals that the Biden administration allowed in. And now there's a lot of resistance. The courts have pushed back in so many regards. Seems like we're pushing people's patience to the very limit. Also have the Chinese happy to get in on the action, and they are funding many of the anti-ICE movements that we're seeing in the country. The communist politicians at the helm, they're continuing to up the rhetoric, encouraging the street animals, the street communists to go and do violent things. Again, testing the patience of the average American. We also have the playbook, the FBI playbook in now the private sector. It hasn't gone away. They're identifying new people so that if indeed there is a lash out, they can go after you for reasons that we'll have to get into. And then also the question is, who can you actually trust? People that purport to be on your side. We talked a couple weeks ago about Congressman Corey Mills from Florida. There's been an update to that story, and it's not good. Talking about stolen valor, which I know will hit Garrett pretty hard in the feels, because that's a man who laid it all on the line multiple times for his country. So we're going to get to all of that today. Excited to get there. Excited to talk to Garrett about it all. He's the co-host here on the American Radicals Podcast. Let's bring him on. You find him on social media at GOBActual. If you can find him. You still suppressed over there, GOB?
I think so. I saw somebody replying to Phil Kennedy, suspendable extraordinaire, saying that they don't see hardly any of our posts ever, even when they click on a main post. So I'm sure we're all shadow banned to some degree. I imagine the current FBI asked their friend Elon Musk to say, "Hey, why don't you put a cap on these guys?"
I was sort of thinking about Elon Musk the other day when I saw him say, "I'm just stepping out of this because I can't, even as the richest man, fix these problems. So I'm just going to step back." And I'm like, kind of sounds like a suspendable move
Hmm.
at this point because
Yep.
what more can you give? But we'll have to talk about that maybe another show. Let's get into some illegal aliens, and the language will be key here as we dig
Migrants.
in. Migrants, immigrants, the huddled masses just yearning to be free. So this one's kind of good, I think, but I want to dig into it because we have been set up to be really angry. So, reporting from the BBC, the United States Supreme Court lets Trump end deportation protections for 350,000 Venezuelans. Remember, that was part of the way that they allowed these asylum seekers into the country. They were technically not illegals because the administration gave them this status. Temporary protected status, TPS. You get your TPS reports on in time? It allows people to live and work in the US legally if their home country is deemed unsafe due to things like war, a natural disaster, or extraordinary and temporary conditions. Venezuelans living in the US were first granted this temporary protected status in 2021 during the Biden administration when they first came in, and he was a demented old fool, and they got hold of the auto pen and they started signing things. So Alejandro Mayorkas, former Secretary of Homeland Security, this is what his justification was for allowing 350,000 Venezuelans. He said they were suffering a complex humanitarian crisis marked by widespread hunger and malnutrition, growing influence and presence of armed groups, repression, and crumbling infrastructure. So basically, crappy government in their country so they can come here. 8 million Venezuelans, they went all over the place, all over South America, Latin America, and the Caribbean, but we took on 350,000 of them. And the Supreme Court here, which was good, ruled that we can say, your time here is done. You should go back to your homeland. 8-1 decision. Ketanji Jackson was the one holdout on this one. No comments. We just, cast a vote, and that was it. But I want to bring this up because I was looking at some of the economic data because the Venezuelan disruption, the crappy government really started about 10 or 11 years ago. So it's not a temporary thing. I mean, this is just the way things are in Venezuela. And I thought, look, if you're going to extend it to them, like certainly you have to extend to people who are worse off, right? Crappy governments are around the entire globe. So I looked at the International Monetary Fund and saw like where Venezuela was ranked and who potentially is worse than them. And do we owe them now a duty, or did the Biden administration? I mean, were they kind of like not as accepting as they should have been? So Venezuela was ranked 62nd
Ooh, that's
on this
kind of
list.
low by my estimation.
Yes, it was. Uh, Average income for a person there is like $4,000, who makes more money than the suspendables. Okay, why didn't we extend open arms to Iran or Egypt or Afghanistan? Well, I guess we did after we crapped that the bed on that withdrawal, or Syria,
At least for those who didn't fall off of an airplane trying to escape.
India, who's an ally. They GDP, the average income there is $2,800 a year. So
Maybe
why
we should
weren't
move, Steve.
we'd be killing it, right? We'd at least be like quasi middle class in Syria, where they make $0 a year. And I wanted to also contrast that with the United States because we have all the land of milk and honey here. We can clearly absorb 8 billion people, even though this place is a vile, vicious, racist country. And who would ever want to live here except for everybody in the world, right? But we're not the richest country in the world by per capita GDP. There are other countries where people earn more money than us here. So why are we uniquely offering our accoutrements to the Venezuelans when there are others out there like Iceland and Singapore and Switzerland and Ireland and Luxembourg?
Well, Steve, it's because we are the great Satan, and for some reason we have to just give everything away. And freedom freedom isn't free and let freedom reign and freedom for all, even when it goes against our laws, apparently. But this is an interesting endeavor, because what's at the root then of giving asylum or aid or both, or whatever you want to call it or throw into the bucket? What's at the root of doing it for a place like Venezuela and not a place like Iran? Because the communist wants to fundamentally change the fabric of our nation. So bringing in Venezuelans who are poor and in violation of our laws already is certainly a way to do it. But why not open up that gate to all sorts of people? So I kind of am a little curious as to what's going on behind the scenes there. Is it a proximity issue where we got the NGOs that are set up south of our border, helping people come here illegally, and also NGOs are heavily funded by the government? So is that a piece of it? I'm not sure, but I do see the wheels turning in my brain, and I just kind of walking away with more questions.
I think logistically, it's just much easier to bring in a bunch of Venezuelans because they can just walk here and wave their flags along the entire way, and have NGOs make sure that they're safe along the way, and get lots of bottles of water and aid and information about how they can go to the nearest point of entry and then claim asylum. Right. But I want to connect that to the other one, which is not necessarily as good, because the Supreme Court here, 8-1, allowed 350,000. 350,000 is, I guess, a start. I mean, there's like 35 million to 50 million of them here. So just a drop in the ocean. But one that's not so good, and pushing us further and further into the powder keg situation, because people are going to get very frustrated. I mean, as much as they want to wave the pom poms and think they won the Super Bowl in November, we're on track to deport less than 1 million illegal aliens, which is
It's
like 2% of what
Yeah,
Biden
it's
allowed in the
not going to
country.
change anything.
So the adjoining piece of this is from Daily Wire, and this is the bad ruling from the Supreme Court, which blocked the administration's bid to resume swift deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. The Supreme Court ruled 7-2, because they're reliably conservative, right, against the Trump administration's attempt to swiftly deport Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act, requiring government officials within the executive branch to provide more than 24 hours for the detainees to challenge their removal. I mean, you owe them due process. 24 hours is the process, but that's not due process enough. We need to get more due processy, according to the Supreme Court. So again, this is an unsigned decision, so they didn't really issue any statements attached to it.
Because they're cowards.
The only two holdouts, Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, they dissented. And the case has been sent back to an appeals court to establish appropriate due process procedures, because they're illegal alien gangbangers, and we owe them a longer period of time before we send their asses back to whence they came, right?
This is a long-standing issue for me. I remember back in before I was in law enforcement, after I got out of the army, went back to college and started down this criminology path and criminal justice and all this. And I remember learning in those early days, some of those early courses about our Constitution and our laws. And I remember even then just logically thinking, why does someone who's breaking the law, they're here illegally? And I want to be specific here to people who have come here illegally. Why do we offer them any due process to begin with? Now, I would say in a law enforcement officer's day-to-day activity, and they encounter an illegal. Maybe initially they don't know that they're here illegally, and so they properly execute the function of their position by going through the proper steps of how they've come to ascertain reasonable suspicion, probable cause, etc. But once you find out that they're here illegally, I would say anything related to that piece of their illegal activity, you don't get due process. And I remember it always kind of being explained to me as, well, that's one of the great things about America is everybody gets due process no matter what. And I would say fast forward to now to 2025, and it's this trickling effect of weakness in these upper echelons. The Supreme Court, there's two guys who dissented who said, no, 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 no. You don't get to have due process. You came here intentionally breaking our laws. You don't get due process anymore. And then the other six say, or other seven say, well,
we're not going to even offer an opinion. We're just going to vote one way and kick it back. I'm just sick of the cowardice, man. And it's sadly, even in the Supreme Court, you've got what are rogue judges at this point. And the last piece you mentioned where it was just Ketanji Brown Jackson who dissented. I mean, she's from the pits of hell as far as it comes from communism. And she's trying to go on Broadway and be an actress. And it's like, why don't you focus on your core function? But somebody like her doesn't even understand what her role is, because she's completely captured and just says, I'm going to vote how I'm going to vote because that's what my side of the aisle requires of me.
Interesting in that the 3 Donald Trump appointed justices in the Supreme Court all ruled against what his administration was all about on that one. So I guess they've been co-opted by the system. We'll get to how the Chinese are infiltrating in a second, but we want to thank the underwriting sponsor of the day for the American Radicals podcast, and that's going to be the M-Clip Company, guys. Go to m-clip.com, m-clip.com. Our promo code is suspendable, SUSPENDABLE, for 10% off. These are money clips made in the USA, family-owned company, luxury goods. We're in this Memorial Day upcoming weekend, so it's very much in the graduation season. These are awesome gifts to give people. They will not break the bank, I promise you. Plus, you get the 10% off with the discount. You get your initials monogrammed on them. They can get baseball teams on there, make them look sleek and metallic or leather. Or you can also get the suspendable merch, which has our badge and our emblem and our logo, all of it available. m-clip.com, 10% off. Use promo code suspendable. Now let's talk about the Chi-Coms, because they are nothing if not savvy, and they see that we might be on this little bit of a powder keg of people really getting angry and frustrated with what happened over the last few years and our inability seemingly to correct it. It just seems like such a solvable problem. And we have people at an Ivory City that just wax poetic, don't do a darn thing as it pertains to illegal aliens or spending cuts because, I don't know, the Doge recommended stuff. And then we said, no, Big Bird has to get his funding. But let's talk about the Chi-Coms. They see vulnerability. They see the powder keg, which is why they're throwing a butt ton of money to some programs that are anti-ICE, Immigration's Customs Enforcement, reporting from Daily Caller. Cash flowing into anti-ICE group coffers. It came from Chinese government link sources. But wait, Garrett, it gets better because you're funding your own demise on top of that. Let's talk about this. This group is called the Chinese American Planning Council, CPC, as opposed to the CCP. Serves to promote the interests of Chinese Americans, low-income communities across New York City. The organization bills itself as the country's largest Asian American social services group, and they say that they provide more than 50 high-quality programs to numerous sites around Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. So it's limited to probably our most important city. As much as I hate it, you have to make the argument that, like, as goes New York, kind of goes the country. And what the Daily Caller was actually able to do was find a video of, and this was the Oversight Project exposed it, of one of the representatives from the CPC giving advice on how you would handle ICE if they came a knocking because they knew there were illegal aliens there. Let's just give this a brief play and then we can react.
In the restaurant that I work at on the weekend, what we train everybody to do is, if we see ICE come to the door, we actually enter a button in our POS system that says Mahigra, and you click it, and then it prints a ticket to everywhere else in the restaurant so that everybody knows, right? So different kinds of protocols based on the type of organization or space. Again, no matter what kind of organization or business that you're in, we have a few ways that you can get ready. Number one is hardening your physical space. Number three, identifying a list of individuals that are authorized to respond if ICE comes to the door, and then having a clear protocol.
This footage was taken during a radical activist meeting in New York City, in which anti-deportation leftists coordinate efforts to stop ICE and law enforcement from enforcing the nation's immigration laws. It was sponsored by the Chinese American Planning Council, or CPC, a radical New York-based NGO with ties to the highest level of the Democrat Party in New York State.
This is Senator Chuck Schumer, and it brings me a great deal of pleasure to welcome all of you to CPC's Lunar New Year virtual benefit.
Isn't that the face of evil?
Dude, okay, man. In a nation where laws actually mattered, Chuck Schumer would be arrested. Plain and simple.
It's a Lunar New Year. Come on, it's the year of the tiger, right? I don't know what it is.
Dude, okay. One, you got this chick giving all this advice. How is that person not in handcuffs yet?
She has a really cool, like, side buzz haircut, so she's a girl boss. So she gets the dispensation from our, law enforcement apparatus.
Because I want to say, hey, FBI, are you doing your job? Because the commies, the Chi-Coms, are engaged in a war, and they know it. Apparently, we don't know it here, because they are actively trying to subvert our strength. One of our strengths used to be our laws, because we followed them and we arrested people when they broke them. And here you have a whole organization, at least in this meeting or seminar or whatever you want to call it. They're actively conspiring against our laws. So, law enforcement, where are you at? And it's got ties to people like Chuck Schumer, who's the pinnacle of the Democrat Party. I'm sorry, Steve. You don't get to take 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years to investigate something like this. You have to do it now, and you have to make it stick, because all the talk about, well, do you want it done right or do you want it done quickly? Well, I want both. And law enforcement in this country, to develop probable cause, you have it right there in the video. We have enough statutes on the books. Pull them up, get some good investigators and lawyers on the case, and start making some freaking arrests. I don't know what other option we have at this point.
I think that there's been a fair amount of research done by Oversight Project and by Daily Caller on this that would constitute a nice packet that you could present to a federal prosecutor. So I do want to give a little bit more facts than just that little video of the girl boss. So around 55% of this organization, the CPC, which is the Chinese American Planning Council, their total revenue, 55%, comes from federal and state government grants funding your demise. According to the House Homeland Security Committee, New York City-based group has been awarded more than $1.4 million in direct federal grants from from Health and Human Services since 2022 under the Biden administration. So in the last 3 years, they're pulling down roughly $500,000 a year in grants from Health and Human Services. Now, let's talk about the Chinese government. Review of the CPC financial records discovered Chinese government-linked sources have been pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into the nonprofit in recent years, raising concerns of potential foreign obstruction of U.S. immigration enforcement. But at this point, is there really a difference between the Communist Chinese Party and housing or Health and Human Services? Because they both want the exact same thing, which is to push us into some collapse, and then we can rebuild. We can build back better into a communist utopia. So I think that this sort of exposure is good to have. But my biggest takeaway is Chinese government ain't no fool. They look long term. They see the vulnerabilities, and they're just going to give it a little bit of a push, Joker style, right?
Right. They've got 100-year plan that they're in the middle of running. So they're not looking so immediately for surpassing America on the global scale, but they're right there. I don't think it's even going to take them 100 years. And by my count, it's somewhere they're at least a decade into this plan. This is you could punch this into the search engine of your choice and find all sorts of stuff about it. I think there's even a book out there called the 100-Year Plan or something like that. So they're actively engaged in seeing our demise, and they're tapping into the side shaved head type of people, because they drink the Kool-Aid. And again, I know we've talked about it before. I still don't understand those people, or Health and Human Services, or many people in government who not only are they anti common or long-standing American principles, they're actively working against it. And I really want to know what's your end goal here, because I don't understand how you can look historically at communism and say, well, it didn't ever work before, but we're going to do it better. That's always been the communist angle and the communist play is, well, we're going to get it right. We're going to do it better. And never in the history of man has it ever worked. Yet here you have people using government funds on top of it, actively trying to thwart longstanding American principle and law.
The revolution never ends. That's why they're called progressives. They're always progressing towards something at this point. And the Chinese plan is long. But let's talk about some other things that are like in the more immediacy, the things that could be making the powder keg a little bit more volatile every single day, things that are getting people frustrated, angry, and primed to, I don't know, maybe embrace their worst ideas and make the worst decisions possible and plunge this country into some sort of kinetic conflict. And it's happening at a federal level and it's happening at a local level. Let's talk about this example from a local level. Progressive prosecutor lets an illegal, what's Fox News, immigrant, so illegal alien teen off easy after a 90-mile-per-hour crash that killed a 24-year-old woman. Feeling a little bit fired up on that one? 15-year-old Colombian teen.
15.
He's not been publicly named because it's in Colorado. They have to shield his identity. He's an underage person. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 100 hours of community service, which he'll probably do at like a CPC type of organization. The teen was racing his Jeep with other kids at speeds of 90 miles per hour in a residential neighborhood in a Denver suburb of Aurora when he T-boned Caitlin Weaver's vehicle at intersection. She was basically put on life support a few days later. They pulled the plug, donated her organs. The teen was arrested, charged with vehicular homicide. The DA office told the family that this was a no plea offer case. They're going to max it out.
Rightfully so.
However, Arapahoe County DA Amy Padden, she's a big progressive endorsed by Bernie Sanders and Jared Polis, who's the gay governor, informed the family that her office instead changed their minds. They're going to negotiate a probation plea deal. And this is according to Caitlin, the victim's dad. Quote, they said by doing 2 years of probation, that's probably more than the judge would have given him anyway if he'd pleaded guilty. So they're actually doing it for your advantage, right? And here's an information about another face of evil. This is the district attorney, Amy Padden. And I said Bernie Sanders endorsed, Jared Polis endorsed. This is the Arapahoe County District Attorney's website. And she's a girl boss, but let's find out a little bit about her. As it says, Amy will focus on, and these, listen to the language because she's a commie. Amy will focus on community safety, alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders, juvenile justice reform, because they can do probation for killing a person, ensuring justice and equity for all. She will also prioritize finding better ways to address mental health and substance abuse problems in the criminal justice system. Very soft language, unless you know, you don't know that she basically endorses a complete jailbreak. You can murder a woman and go free. Just, volunteer at Habitat for Humanity for a couple Saturdays.
Mm-hmm. What about the justice and the equity for Caitlin Weaver and her family, her friends, her loved ones that she's left behind? And again, I'm going to point to the federal government on this one, which, as you know here, I want less government intervention. But when a DA like this, a governor, a judge, law enforcement at the local or state level, when you're this far off the rails, what other option do you have left than to get Tom Homan on the phone or Kash Patel or whoever, all both of them, get them all on the line and say, not only are we going to arrest this 15-year-old illegal immigrant and deport him, we're going to get his family and we're going to deport them if they're illegal, which I imagine they are since he is. And we're going to go after this DA for public corruption because the victim here is Miss Weaver, and she's the only victim here until you start looking at the other crimes like the illegal entry, the speeding, the driving when clearly he doesn't have a license because he's only 15. So you start piling these up, and again, what other option do we have left? Because someone like this commie district attorney, you need to go to prison, and the federal government now is in a position and in a place where they must start people will say, oh, you're getting vengeance or making an example. I don't even say that. Just follow our laws. You don't get to subvert justice because of your commie ideology. And that's really what this boils down to for her.
Her commie ideology is 180 degrees different from the way you and I and others in the American Radicals podcast audience view the way justice is supposed to work, that the government's supposed to be this shield, supposed to use the law to protect the American citizens against fraud and force. But instead, she's going to use the power at her fingertips to empower her allies. She's going to reward her friends and punish her enemies. And Caitlin Weaver, she's an enemy. I mean, I don't know what her politics were one way or another, but she didn't meet the intersectional ladder quite enough, because this 15-year-old illegal alien is preferable to District Attorney Patton, who I will note, she's operating in Arapahoe County, Colorado. It's a cowboy state, right? So it should surprise nobody, though, that her bachelor's degree comes from the College of William and Mary, and she went to Georgetown University. So just a Washington, D.C. communist who made her way out to Colorado at some point. And let's pivot to a state authority. Now, he endeavored to become a federal authority, and that's Tim Awal's governor, land of 1,000 genders. And he's using some very heated language, and he has a proof of concept of how he empowered not just the government, but people operating within that state out of bounds of the law to bring about the powder keg and push it further and further and further along. So I got a couple of video clips as it pertains to Tim Walz. One is just him making the allegations that ICE trying to deport illegal aliens is the Gestapo.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared. To be clear, there's no way for us to know whether they were actually criminals or not, because they refused to give them a trial. We're supposed to just take their word for it.
So again, they're high on the intersectional ladder for Governor Walz there, because the due process he wants is for illegal aliens. We don't know if they're criminals. They're illegal aliens, and they're getting shipped off to some foreign place. You mean where they came from, Governor?
Exactly.
Right? And he's getting all jazzed up. I mean, no jazz hands there. He was a little bit more austere. It was a graduation ceremony. But that guy didn't hesitate for 2 seconds to empower the forces that be during the, what does it always go back to, Garrett?
COVID tyranny.
He sent his Gestapo around to go do the following.
No, there's more. Look at this. They just keep coming.
Go inside! Get inside! Get inside! Get inside! Get in your house now! Let's go!
No.
Light him up! Go inside now! Get in the house!
Get in.
That seems like more of a Gestapo than ICE doing removal operations, doesn't it?
Far more.
On American citizens.
Right.
Light them up.
There's so many layers here, because there's clearly a breakdown throughout the chain of command, all the way up to the governor's mansion on this one. And it's not just Minnesota. I've mentioned channels like Lackluster before, where you can go and find all sorts of tyranny, all sorts of actual Gestapo-like behaviors by law enforcement in this country. And it's a shame. There are countless people in that profession who never, ever should have been given that role. And look at just this clip during the COVID tyranny. Oh, we can march through the streets like stormtroopers, and you standing just in the threshold of your doorway, of your private property, of your house, recording us, which also you can do in this country. You can record the government, and they get the order, light them up. And did you see how many people turned, or how many of these stormtroopers turned and started to shoot? And I know that story a little bit.
Too, man. They were itching to send those paper balls.
They could not wait. And then they did. And so you tyrannized people who were doing something even that is completely legal. I was going to say even during COVID, but I had to catch myself, because especially during COVID is when people should have been recording the government and saying, look at this. and they couldn't wait to unload. It's sickening. And then for Tim Awals to get up there in his gown at this commencement speech and to act like ICE are the Gestapo. I mean, give me a break. And we will be some of the first to call out law enforcement tyranny when we see it in this country. And we'll continue to do that as people who used to be in law enforcement and as guys who still talk to current former colleagues who we worked on the police department with, former FBI colleagues. They're not all bad. We'll also say that, and we'll give credit where credit's due, like ICE actually rounding up the illegals as they should be. But when you cross the threshold like this and actually start acting like Gestapo, maybe we do need to just burn it all down and start over. But then again, you still have the problem of the heart, and you can't fix that.
Burn it all down and start over is an interesting choice of words for the next Tim Walz item that I want to bring and link into this. Because, look, he has a problem with the Gestapo, the ICE agents removing illegal aliens who are somehow not criminal in his minds, even though they broke the law when they came into the country, regardless of any actions that they took after that, and sending them from whence they came. No problem with sending out his stormtroopers because people in 2020 were told to stay home and stay safe and not go to the job that they used because it was not essential, even though they used it to feed their family and pay their mortgage. Light them up. That's just fine. But then around the same time, there was this little thing that happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd. So they started to burn the whole thing down. But for one reason or another, the vile, vicious communist who is Tim Walz wanted the street animals out there to do those things. So when those folks turned on the police, not the stormtroopers, or maybe there was some sort of interpollinization, cross-pollinization of them there, but we don't know that. The Minneapolis police, who were supposed to protect that community against the riots, I mean, fiery, mostly peaceful riots, Governor Walz told the police to stand down and allow them to burn their precinct. Here's the news report.
Police officers testified at the Minnesota Senate today. The officers are all board members for the Minneapolis Police Federation. And as Esme Murphy reports, they offered up a scathing critique of government and police leaders during the riots following George Floyd's death.
That's not what we stand for.
Her voice shaking, Minneapolis Police Sergeant Anna Hedberg says during the riots, officers were abandoned by state, city, and department leaders.
To watch them go through that was so heartbreaking. To know that they could have died because we were not allowed to respond the way that we have been trained to respond.
During the riots, the officers were told they could not wear protective frog suits, but were still hit and injured with bottles, cement, and more. Sergeant Hedberg blames state, city, and department leaders for the abandonment of the 3rd Precinct.
I heard the governor say, "Give it up." It wasn't directly to me, it was through a phone call. How the governor says, "Give up the precinct."
Seems like the 180 degrees different perspective that you would want from someone who's looking for your objective good as a representative of his constituents for the state. But again, this is the powder keg, right? They're pushing people like they did in 2020 with the coronavirus lockdowns and madness, and they're just itching for another reason to crack down.
100%. We've mentioned it before. I can't plug it enough. The fall of Minneapolis. If you are interested in what happened during the riots with George Floyd and the lies from the government, check it out. It's very well done. There's all sorts of body cam footage and other types of footage and interviews that really help paint the picture appropriately to what happened there, to include information about Tim Walz and his own quotes. But again, I have a difficult time here. But also, there's a little grace because this is when the doctrine of the lesser magistrate comes into play. So you've got this sergeant who we just heard from representing the union and saying the governor ordered us to give it up. Where were the men and women of resolve to stand up and say no? Where was the police chief, the captain of the precinct, the sergeants, the lieutenants, the foot patrol or the patrol officers and detectives, the seasoned veterans who've been there for 20, 30 years? Where was your unification against that evil, wicked order from your governor? And for all of you to stand up and say no. No, no, no. We will not do that because we do not bend the knee to evil. But instead, we'll just go to court and we'll shed some tears and try to make our complaint heard. But then the grace piece is, how many of you are going to stand up? 3, and then start a couple podcasts down the road?
They're going to be super lucrative, relatively speaking, when we move to Syria, Garrett. And look, they're re-racking it. The powder keg was there in 2020 because people were locked up in their homes and they were giving up everything and said, "Oh, you're getting a stimmy check. It's all fine, right? Just Netflix and chill." It's starting again. We said we have the Tim Walls calling for things. We have the institutional problems that we highlight with the Chinese party getting these activists involved. And then we have the elected, vile, vicious Marxists who are trying to storm ICE facilities as it pertains to deportations of illegals, who are now actively getting out there and calling for more violence. So we'll give this a play to kind of put a bow on the illegal aliens aspect to it, but then there's other elements as well that we'll have to get into. Here's this woman, and she's wearing the same red coat, which is so funny. Her name is LaMonica MacGyver. She's the one who body slammed the ICE agent.
We will not take this. We will fight back. Fight back. Fight back. And as I close out, because I know we've been out here for a long time, and goddamn it, shut down the city. We are at war. Anytime a person can pay $250 million into a campaign and they be given full access to the Department of Treasury of the United States of America, we are at war.
All right, whatever she's saying doesn't matter to the street communists, other than we're at war, shut down the city.
Yep.
That's a direct call for violence, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And let's just pair it with this not illegal alien argument, but the story that came out of California, where the FBI is now determining that the fertility clinic bombing was terrorism. And there's some concerns that I have here. I'm sure Garrett will as well. So, reporting from NBC, FBI links California fertility clinic bombing to anti-natalist ideology. Well, I guess some sort of intel analyst wrote a paper somewhere to come up with that term. I'm sure it'll become more and more common because we hate them babies here on the political left in the country.
Let's just call it what it is. It's anti-life ideology. I mean, come on.
The car bombing outside a California fertility clinic killed one person. By that, it means the guy who did it, right? Injured 4 others, appears to have been driven by anti-natalist ideology, according to 2 senior law enforcement officials, so they're FBI people. Anti-natalism refers to the belief that no one should have children. Well, I'm glad that he took his life. I wish he hadn't hurt others in the pursuit of that. Investigators focusing on social media posts made by the suspect include a 30-minute audio recording, which they say support anti-natalist views. But that's not enough, Garrett. Anti-natalist, it's got a lot of syllables in it. It reminds people that the unborn are alive. So we need to go to the Washington Post because democracy dies in darkness. Fertility clinic bombing spotlights nihilistic violent extremism wave, which we've covered briefly, but I think worth delving back into as we're sitting on this powder keg. And the mission set of national security, regardless of who is in charge of the FBI, continues to devolve and give them the opportunity, the capabilities, and the terminology to go after you.
We believes in nothing, Lebowski.
Nihilistic violent extremism has been a growing domestic threat in recent years, with a number of incidents defying common ideological markers. Common ideological markers would be like, what is terrorism, Garrett? Would it be a fair sort of like 30,000 foot descriptor of terrorism, according to the legal code, to be you have a political ideology, you're inspired by that, you agree that you're going to use violence, and through the violence instill fear in people to bring about the political outcomes, but you're inspired by an ideology, right?
100%. It's Steve, we must be connecting. The synapses are connecting, because I pulled it up as Lama Quinta MacGyver, or whatever her name is, was talking, because one, there's a First Amendment issue there, because that's incitement. Just because you're an elected official, you don't get to incite imminent lawless action or violent action. We've covered this on our First Amendment deep dive episodes a while back. But the federal government defines domestic terrorism as ideologically driven crimes committed by individuals in the United States that are intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population or influence the policy or conduct of a government. When you are anti-life to the point where you're driving into a clinic to blow it up, yeah, that suffices in my book as far as the definition goes.
All right, so back to the Washington Post here again, because democracy dies in darkness. I got to give it to you twice today, Garrett,
love
because
it.
we're doing lots of black pills. All right, let's dig into the nihilistic violent extremism because it's on the rise. Experts say, trust the experts, nihilistic extremists are often motivated by a philosophy that seeks to hasten the world's downfall, distinct from political, racially, or ideologically motivated violence. So it doesn't fit the statute for terrorism.
Yeah, they're trying to make that pitch. Okay.
Okay. All right. By definition, it doesn't meet any of the criteria, but we're still going to go with it. Networks of nihilistic violent extremists, basically incels, dude who hate their lives because they can't get a girl to hold their hand. They're a quote growing in size, and it seems like we don't have great solutions for prevention yet, said Amy Cooter, co-founder of the Institute for Countering Digital Extremism, which sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, Garrett. Let's go AMRAD style. The Institute for Countering Domestic Extremism. I went to the website, which is brand new because they were formed in 2025, conveniently when the new administration came in.
Oh, gee, how about that?
The website sucks. Okay, you can't find anything on there. There's no links to anything. It's just very much like kind of government speak, soft language, very much like the district attorney Padden from the Arapahoe County, where you know that they're communists, but you just don't have that definitive thing. There was one link, though, to an umbrella organization, which I tracked down, which is the Accelerationism Research Consortium, ARC. I think we've talked about ARC before, but I won't give the details too much of them. I just really want to dig into who Amy Cooter is because the Washington Post, Democracy Dies in Darkness, saw fit to cite her when they were talking about nihilistic violent extremism, which is somehow terrorism, even though it's not terrorism.
She's the expert, don't you say?
She's the deputy director. She's got a PhD, Dr. Amy Cooter. She's like a Dr. Jill Biden doctor. Director and deputy and research director for ARC. She focuses on, quote, anti-government extremism
Dun, dun, dun.
groups that use, quote, nostalgic understanding of the past, like a Betsy Ross flag, to justify their actions. Her primary expertise is on U.S. domestic militias, militia violent extremism, and groups of armed individuals, people who have them guns and have the Second Amendment, who see it as their civic duty to uphold the Constitution.
Oh, huh. Sounds
There's
like a very American principle to me.
That's a picture of Miss Amy Cooter. I went to her website as well. Now, it says there, and she wrote this, I'm an expert and consultant on extremist groups. I have special focus on U.S. domestic militias related to nostalgic groups that are commonly termed right-wing or patriot groups. So she just hates conservatives and calls them terrorists.
She hates America.
So she works for ARC now and the ICDE, that's the Institute for Countering Digital Extremism, which I brought up. But previously, she did research, director of research at Middlebury's Center for Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism, because Amy Cooter is a professional, useless person, but she generates paperwork that is then imbibed by intel analysts at the FBI, who then write the papers about nihilistic violent extremism. So let's go to her prior employer, which is Middlebury, and the recent publications that come from them, because they're just down the middle. Veteran perspectives on extremist exploitations of the military, because militias and people in the military are bad, evaluating extremism in the military, and 3D printed guns and school safety. So we don't like guns either. These are legitimate sources brought by legitimates in quotations for clear reasons, bought by the Washington Post, which is a news source because democracy dies in darkness, highlighting how a person who blew up a fertility clinic likely is right wing, or they're just setting a narrative for whatever bad thing happens. We're just going to assign some innocuous term, which isn't really terrorist, nihilistic, violent extremism. They just didn't like their life, but they're a terrorist. i.e., they're connected to right wing, i.e., we should mobilize and weaponize the apparatuses at the federal government to go after them for reasons.
And only those who are on the right wing, only those who advocate for the Constitution, only veterans, only people who like guns, aka the Second Amendment. And then they're going to twist and manipulate and obfuscate and turn someone like this anti-natalist bomber. This guy, you're clearly not a right wing domestic terrorist if you're bombing a fertility clinic. You're far more aligned with Amy Cooter than she would have you believe. But she's dedicated her life to fighting back against the patriarchy, against the Constitution, against the founding of this nation, against principles that used to mean something. And then she also dives into the circular intelligence cycle, as Steve referenced, where she's putting out products and information. Typically, you're working at a place like Milberg. Your access is only to open source material, but she's the expert on militia. And then people in the FBI will find that open source and they'll inject it into the FBI system. And look at the big widespread problem we have of veterans and militias, and they're all domestic terrorists and extremists.
Do you think Amy Cooter thinks it's problematic for the Chinese Communist Party to give money to anti-ICE groups?
Negative.
No.
She's here for it.
The only reason you don't know that is because she doesn't have the side haircut from the picture there. It looks more presentable. It's the face of legitimacy, which is going to be the pivot to the last piece, which is a long piece. Stick with us here, guys, because we're talking about the powder keg. You're hoping to have some people in some positions of power who are good faith actors who will just tell you the truth and maybe have haircuts that look like they're buzzed on the side on both sides because they're legitimate. They have the face of legitimacy. So let's pivot over to an update on the story that we covered down on my congressional representative, Corey Mills, because he had problems with maybe being a secret Muslim, maybe doing like weird arms deals while at the same time being on an armed committee for the government. And I'm going to hit you close in the feels, Garrett, because he's apparently doing stolen valor that is on par with Pete Buttigieg, perhaps worse. Reporting from the Blaze, this was a bombshell story from some people that I know over there. You know a few of them there too as well. You got Peter Giddle, Jill Savage, Joe Hanneman. The piece is entitled Stolen Valor, Veterans Dispute Corey Mills Record. He fooled a lot of us. So if you got problems with nihilistic violent extremism, maybe Corey Mills is not your best avenue to go and complain about. Let's dig in. So Mills is under new and intense scrutiny after the Blaze revealed that he was married at the Anwar al-Awlaki Mosque, really, by the guy who was an unindicted co-conspirator for the 93 bombing at the World Trade Center. Multiple men who work with Corey Mills at military contractor DynCorp, they told the Blaze that when the company demanded that employees verify their military services, training, qualifications, at the request of the State Department, that Corey Mills delayed until the deadline, then disappeared, left his rifle and gear laid out on his bed, and they say he never returned. Corey Mills has often made the claim that he was, quote, blown up twice while on missions in Iraq for DynCorp. William Kern, he's a former Marine, which is, I think George Hill would take quite a bit of umbrage with. William Kern is a Marine, just not active. He's a counter sniper who worked with Corey Mills at DynCorp, said that there were blank templates for certificates floating around. Quote, there were around 35 guys who got the same thing. Mills told the Blaze he suffered a concussion when the suburban SUV in which he was riding was damaged by an IED. In a separate incident, Mills' motorcade was hit by a roadside bomb. Mills' vehicle was allegedly 50 yards away from the one that actually sustained the bomb damage. Kern said that it makes no sense for Mills to lie about being blown up because he did not get blown up, but he actually rendered medical aid to the people who were hurt. So why is he claiming that he got blown up? Mills' colleagues said he lied about other things. He claimed to have been in the Army 75th Ranger Regiment. All right, I'm going to pause it there, Garrett. All right. I'm sure you'd seen examples of stolen valor.
Oh, yeah.
Why do these dudes always have to be special forces? Like,
Steve.
couldn't you just say you were an 11 Bravo infantry guy and you were just doing your job, things you couldn't talk about?
This is another one of these topics that I've never understood. And you're right. It's always that. It's always, I was a MARSOC Raider and a Delta Force operator and on SEAL Team 6 and Ranger Battalion and Special Forces, or at least one of those. To me, my belief, and based on experience with it as well, these people have done enough research, or maybe they were a veteran, so they know a little bit more than your average person out there. And so they think they can get one over on them. And the root is hubris, which is the long-standing problem we talk about with the FBI. But it's original sin. That's the root of it, is people's pride, their hubris, and that's what it comes down to here. Oh, I was in Ranger Battalion. Okay, as soon as I hear something like that, I'm immediately skeptical from anybody, because it happens so often where people claim to be one of these, tier 1 or whatever, which Ranger Battalion I think is tier 3, but that doesn't matter. Who cares? We're like, look at me. I was at 11 Bravo. That's it. All right, and that's what I did. That's how my life went. So what? Who cares? I just don't get it, man. I never did, and I never will. And people like this are the bottom of the barrel scum.
So Mills's actual DD 214 says that he was a combat medic certified with emergency medical technician course in 1999. His MOS, which is basically his job, corresponds with healthcare specialist. There's no mention of his service in the Army Rangers. And actually, to be an Army Ranger medic, you'd have to go to it's like almost a year. It's like 40 something weeks to become a medic for the Ranger Battalion. According to Mills' application for a promotion to shift leader at DynCorp, it wasn't enough to be at DynCorp. He wanted to get promoted. He said he served as a medic in the 75th Ranger Regiment and received training at U.S. Army Sniper School. So he was a medic and a sniper.
Oh, please, dude.
If you had a medic, would you send him to sniper school, or would you just have him available to bandage people?
Dude. Okay. And this is so the Army code for a combat medic is 68 whiskey. And all this stuff is, and maybe it was different in 1999. When I was in, it was 68 whiskey. I don't think that's changed. We loved our doc. In an infantry platoon, you got one. That's what you get. You get the one doc. And why is that not enough for somebody like Corey Mills? Why do you got to lie? Why do you got to say, well, I was in Ranger Battalion? No, you weren't. And you're not going to freaking sniper school, dude.
They hadn't made Hacksaw Ridge as a movie yet, and it said the medics were the heroes. Like, the snipers are the cool guys, right? And DynCorp is full of cool guys, which is why he lied about his sniper training, which we'll get to right now. So DynCorp, they sent him to sniper school based on his claims of having prior experience.
Even that. Okay, DynCorp, what's your problem? Why are you not looking at the dude's DD 214? You have it on file.
That's a good point. And we're sending those guys over there to do things so we have plausible deniability to say that our armed forces are officially doing them. So another person whose name is Jesse Parks, he was the supervisor for Mills, quote, he got through it, and this is a reference to the sniper school. He got through it, but he really struggled. It was like he was learning it for the first time.
Because he was.
When the State Department snipers working for DynCorp had to go to the range to requalify, some noticed peculiarities. Quote, we would look over and Corey would be doing bleep on this ballistic calculator, like apps. Dude, it literally takes you longer to put the information in than it should take you to do this in your head.
Mm-hmm.
He also claimed he was an attachment member for JSOC, performed numerous JSOC missions in Iraq. The JSOC information is also not on his DD 214, which shame on you, DynCorp, for not catching. Good on the Blaze, though. Closing it out, Army Form 638 details support for Mills' Bronze Star, says that Corey Mills earned the award for acts of heroism in Iraq in 2003, including rendering life-saving aid to 2 wounded soldiers and subduing an enemy combatant in a separate engagement. There's no mention of Mills in accounts given by members of the 1st Battalion, 325th Airborne, Alpha Company, or from the company commander for this entire incident. 2 men, Jesse Walker and August Burnt, tended to the people who were injured and then the enemy fire as well. So seems like he's kind of fitting into the template that you laid out for us, Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
Your final thoughts on that story, and then your final thoughts on the day, because this is a powder keg.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I really appreciate this Corey Mills story because we're heading into Memorial Day weekend, and it's a good time to remember our people who have served our nation. Okay, especially those who have fallen. But let's not forget that there are a lot of freaking scumbags like Corey Mills who try to stand on their empire of dirt. And in this case, it's not even real. It's not even actual dirt because it's made up. Bottom of the barrel. Of course, he ended up being a politician, Steve. Of course. Because somebody like that, who is that scummy, it's the natural next step is to get into politics. So bravo, Corey Mills, for your lies and for your just despicable behavior. And quite frankly, it ties in very nicely to what we started on the last episode. Exodus 20, verse 16, the ninth commandment: "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." And the sermon that we're diving into now, also they tie in 1 John chapter 2. If you recall, the prior to the last episode, we were in 1 John chapter 2. We were going through verses 15 and 17. This one that we're in now, it ties in the ninth commandment: shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And it combines it with the following passage from 1 John 2. It picks up where we left off. 1 John 2, 18 through 27. "Children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come." Maybe like Corey Mills. He's anti-truth. "Therefore, we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they were not of us, for if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. But they went out, that it might become plain that they all are not of us. But you have been anointed by the Holy One, and you all have knowledge. I write to you not because you do not know the truth, but because you know it, and because no lie is of the truth." No lie is of the truth. "Who is the liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son. No one who denies the Son has the Father. Whoever confesses the Son has the Father also. Let what you heard from the beginning abide in you. If what you heard from the beginning abides in you, then you too will abide in the Son and in the Father. And this is the promise that he made to us, eternal life. I write these things to you about those who are trying to deceive you. But the anointing that you received from him abides in you, and you have no need that anyone should teach you. But as his anointing teaches you about everything and is true and is no lie, just as it has taught you, abide in him." Let me go to here.
What is today's news is quickly yesterday's news. And that is certainly true on a general sense, but I'm sure each one of us can sense it and believe it and understand that in a deeply personal sense. That it just seems like we can never get ahead. It seems like things are constantly in flux, that the world is constantly changing. And that's all the more reason, as those who follow Jesus Christ this morning, that we believe in what we just heard. That there is something that is immovable, that there is someone who never changes, that Jesus Christ is truly the solid rock, and he gives us his word, which is true, so that we can live with confidence that a world that is rapidly changing, there is one thing that will never change, and that there's an author of that truth that is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. In fact, it was Jesus who said, "If you abide in my word, you will know that you are my disciple. You will know the truth." And what will that truth do? It will set you free. The sanctity of truth as it comes to us in the ninth commandment. Let's study these two passages together. The ninth commandment.
We'll stop there for today. But we'll keep diving into this a little bit too, because I think it's critical right now, one, to remember, to know that the ultimate truth is found in Christ. And think of the stories we've covered just today. It seems to be a growing trend that anti-truth is the root of American Radicals podcast. We bring lies that are in the public sphere, whether it's Corey Mills or somebody from the Milberg Institute who's talking about domestic terrorism and trying to twist and gaslight. Lies. Oftentimes it's from the government that we bring to you here. And we have to remember that Satan is the father of lies and Jesus Christ is the pinnacle of truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. We have to build our firm foundation on the truth. And the cornerstone of that truth is Jesus Christ.
And before we have a palate cleanse today, we had a couple of Rumble rants come in over the last couple of episodes from the same person. And Peaches, we need to acknowledge you and our gratitude for your generosity. So, Peaches62, this was on Tuesday. Actually, Joe did help me restore my soul, just in a different context, and he was implying that's a reference to Joe Biden and the show Soul Autopsy. Peaches, your soul, if we did an autopsy, I'm sure looks nothing like old Joe's. And this came in a little earlier. Don't move. Thank you very much for the day. And we get a palate cleanse, and this is a ranking of some of the funniest comments that you can make to a police officer, just because I like cops that are doing fun things and saying fun things and interfacing with the people as a deacon for their protection and their service, and also just to crack them up sometimes.
Is there anything on this boat that shouldn't be?
Just you, officer.
Hey? So, yeah. Hold on. Just there.
I got one
leg. Homie, she got me.
Does everybody ask you to arrest him?
License, registration, and insurance, please.
Dad, we've been through this. You can't just pull me over because you see my car on the road.
Just making sure you're okay.
Excuse me, is that okay to pet?
What do you think you guys are doing?
Hello, Lieutenant.
What are you eating?
Donut.
Is there anything on this boat?
Oh, I love it. I love it. You know, it's a burdensome profession. So to see them having some fun like that is heartwarming to me.
All right, guys. Appreciate you, as always, for joining us today on the American Radicals podcast. We'll be back with you Saturday, 10:30 Eastern time. Until then, guys, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.